All right, how does my hair look? Guys, stay with me and we're going to talk about some money, honey.
You better get fired up.
Happy Friday, baby. Excited to see you guys. Appreciate you for joining me. We're going to talk about money. How much cash does it take in hand to actually get into a home? And the reason I want to talk about that is because that's one of the two biggest things that hold people back. My big goal, I love selling million, $2 million, $3 million homes, but my favorite thing on the planet is taking someone who's renting and, in my opinion, throwing their money away every single month to pay off a landlord's mortgage instead of their own, man, and still building wealth themselves. If I can get them to purchase a home and take that baby step, man, is that a life changer. My favorite thing in the world is to hear back from those people 5, 10, 20 years down the road. I can't believe, yeah, I've actually been selling home for 20 years. And you hear these wonderful stories of Joe. We just got a check for some six-figure amount because we started buying homes with you 3 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago. It's life-changing. So, guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about, I told you there were two issues. One is credit, one is cash. Credit isn't as big a deal as you think it is. I'm not saying you can get a home with horrible credit, but to get your credit from horrible to where you need to be to get a home generally takes us 30 to 90 days with most people. It's not a big deal. Now, most people wait until they're 30 days before they need a home. And then, yes, sometimes it can be a big deal. But if you start this process 6 months out, we can solve 95% of those problems, right? It's not a problem. Everybody's credit is repairable, okay? So let's get to the money. And I want to talk about specific numbers. Everything we're going to talk about here is going to be on a $400,000 home, just so you've got kind of a base idea of what we're going with and you've got specific numbers, okay? You've got two different sets of numbers that you're going to have to shell out of your pocket. And both of them have solutions, and both of them can be whittled down to zero depending upon the situation. Okay. So let's talk about the two different types of cash that you need. One is going to be your down payment. So when they talk about a conventional loan with 5% down, or a conventional with 3 down, or FHA with 3.5% down, or VA with 0% down, that is your down payment. It's your down payment only. That's the skin in the game that the bank wants to see you've got, because they've done all their math and algorithms and everything else to determine that if you got that much cash in, we're going to hit the default rate we're looking to hit, right? If you got 0 down, the default rate goes up. If you got 20 down, obviously the default rate comes down. But they can't just say, hey, everybody needs 20% down, or they're never going to sell any loans. So they've got to take a certain amount of risk, but they got to know what they're doing to get that risk, right? So that's also why the more you put down, the terms tend to get better. Why? Because the bank sees you've got a little more skin in the game. The opportunity for you to default goes down. And because your odds of defaulting go down, they're willing to give you better terms. Okay, so that's why. So again, on a VA loan, 0% down. On an FHA loan, the minimum is 3.5% down. And on a conventional, it's 5% down. Unless you're a first-time home buyer, then it's 3% down. What's a first-time home buyer? You can have owned a home before, and you can still be a first-time home buyer. What it means is in the last 36 months, you have not had a homestead property in your name. So if you owned 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 23 years ago, but you have not had a homestead property in your name since, you're good to go, right? Maybe you've been renting, staying with mom and dad, whatever it is, and you own a couple rentals, but they're not homestead. You're good to go. So those are the minimum downs on the three major types of loans. Now, the other part of the cash that you need down, right? Down payment is the first one. The other one is closing costs. And closing costs have a lot of different things to them, right? You're going to want to talk with your realtor, your lender, your title company, and they'll give you all of those different costs. It can be anywhere between 10 and 20, usually different line items on a closing sheet that we're going to see that are attributed to buyers' closing costs, okay? So a lot of those closing costs are going to be lending costs. You're also going to have some title costs, maybe title insurance costs. You might have some, commissions depending upon the realtor that you're working with. And man, I feel like I got to sneeze. If I sneeze, I'm going to blow this out. I got to sneeze. Now it's going to go. Nope. I'm a big sneezer, man. I'm sorry. Excuse me. So anyway, you've got all these different line items, but I generally tell buyers it's going to be between 3 and 4% is what your closing costs are going to be, right? Now that's a big gap, because 3% on 400 grand is 12,000 and 4% is 16,000. Now stay with me. The numbers will get better, I promise. That's a pretty big gap. That's a $4,000 gap. But here's the deal. On VA, you've got some bigger fees. It's called the funding fee, right? But that funding fee is dependent upon 73 different things. And so it could be zero or it could be several thousands of dollars. So we really got to look at you and your specific situation before we can give you a determination on how big those closing costs are going to be, right? With FHA and conventional, you're typically looking at, so here's the thing too. Let me back up a little bit, right? Some of these costs that you're paying are percentages of the price. So as your price goes up, it's not going to matter. It's still X percent, right? As your price comes down, doesn't matter. It's still X percent. Some of these things are flat fees. Maybe title just charges $600 or whatever title click charges, right? Well, they charge $600 whether you're buying a $200,000 property or an $800,000 property. So when you buy an $800,000 property, it's going to be closer to that 3% in closing costs. And when you buy more towards, let's say, the 250, it's going to be more towards 4, maybe even 4.5% of your purchase price is what your closing costs will entail, right? So it really kind of depends on that 400,000. Though I'm usually telling people 3.5 to 4% is about where you're going to be, right? Unless you're VA, then it's going to be a little bit over. So a lot of little asterisks there, but unless you're VA, well, I'll just say unless you're VA. If you're VA, call me and we'll talk about the numbers, right? But unless you're VA, you're looking at about 3.5 to 4% on a first-time home buyer purchase. If you're looking at those higher numbers, which you guys have bought before more than likely, you know how it works, so I probably don't need to explain this as much. But for the first-time home buyers in that $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 range, figure 3.5 to 4%. Now, let's talk about how to get rid of some of those numbers, right? Because people are saying, well, Joe, I heard you could come in 0% down, or Joe, when I rent, it's first, last, and deposit. I just need 3 times the monthly. Here, that's considerably more. If you're looking at a $2,500 rental, first, last, and deposit, that's $7,500. Want a $400,000 home? If you're looking at FHA with 3.5% down, plus I'm telling you it's going to be 3.5, 4%, let's say 3.5 for easy numbers. That's 7% you're going to need. That's $28,000 versus $7,500. That's a big difference. Joe, why am I watching this video? This is why. Number one, mathematically, financially, wealth-wise, if I can sit down with you and show you the difference between owning a home over time and renting over time, you're going to see unquestionably that it makes more sense to own that property, right? And number two, there are ways to get around some of these costs. For example, with the closing costs, you can ask the seller to contribute a certain amount towards your buyer's closing costs, right? So each loan is different, and each product that you're going to be using is going to be a little bit different. But generally speaking, you're going to be able to cover all or most of your closing costs with the seller saying, yeah, we'll cover it, right? And you might be thinking, well, Joe, you're making it sound too easy. Not every seller is going to say yes. You're absolutely right. And the tighter the market gets, the more of a buyer's market it becomes, which that's kind of the way it's headed. The more it gets that way, the more apt they are to say, yes, we will bend and we will cover your closing costs. Now, if they won't cover your closing costs, right? So again, let's just say it's 3.5%. 3.5% of 400 grand is 12, 13, $14,000. If they say, no, we will not cover $14,000, you can come back and say, we will offer you $414,000, but we want you to cover $14,000 in closing costs. So now you're getting your full 400 grand net. We're putting that 14,000 in closing costs into the loan, which is going to cost us, you got to talk to a lender for this, but I'm guessing it's going to be 80, $90 a month. And we're able to not have closing costs. We can keep that cash in our pocket, which is awesome for us, right? A lot of sellers will say yes to that. Every seller? No. Why wouldn't every seller say yes to that? They're still getting their 400 grand, which is what they wanted. The only reason you would say no to that, let me make sure that's right. The only reason I can currently think of that you would say no to that, if I'm missing something, put it in the comments, is because the appraisal may fall short. Now, typically in a $400,000 home, I'm not personally that worried. There's so many comps. It's not going to be that tough to find a comp. But once you hit that 6, 7, 800,000 plus range, it becomes very challenging in Port St. Lucie to find comps to support those higher numbers. So anytime we're artificially inflating those prices, I don't like it as a realtor. And I'm telling my clients, whether it's a seller or the buyer, hey, I know we're achieving a lot of goals here, and that's awesome, but one of the goals we're not achieving is the ability to necessarily close, because if that appraisal falls short and cash is our issue, we're not going to have the cash to cover the difference, right? So just keep that in the back of your mind. Again, when you're looking at $300,000-$400,000, my concern is pretty low. But if you start getting up into the 450, 500 or higher, the concern grows, in my opinion, right? So that's an option, but just be aware of the concerns, okay? But listen, if your options are go blow your money on a rental and lose an entire year's worth of cash paying off somebody else's mortgage, or take a 30-day risk on seeing what an appraisal comes in at, and maybe I can start building my personal wealth, it's a no-brainer to me. An appraisal, what's an appraisal? $700-800? You're risking $700-800 to be able to pay down and build equity in your own mortgage at, I think I've got my, no, I don't have my mortgage. Do I have my mortgage statement? I don't. I just had it. But I think we're paying down, and I think my purchase price, I had purchased 2 years ago, and my purchase price, now, I hate to share this with you because I don't want you to think what Joe just said is going to apply to me, right? Because there's a million different variables. But I had purchased my home years ago for $390,000. That's almost the $400,000 we're talking about. Now, my rate was a little bit better, right? I'm at 2.25, but I'm paying about $800-900 a month towards paying down my principal. So roughly $10,000-12,000 a year in equity is built, assuming the market doesn't go up at all. Right? I owed $390, now I owe $380. Next year I owe $370, blah, 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 blah. And it keeps going down. That does not happen in a rental. Not only are you not building equity, but next year's rent is likely going to go up 3-4%. On average, last couple of years, it's been 20, 50, 100%, right? You're going to get rid of that too, which is awesome. So that is the closing cost side of it. And again, how much you can get from a seller is dependent upon what you can negotiate with a seller and what your lender is saying. Okay, so always talk to your lender first and say, how much can we ask for? And then go talk with the seller. But remember, anytime you ask for something, you're losing something else, right? If the seller's willing to give something up, maybe you would have got something else, price or a date or some of their furniture or whatever. There's a lot of different terms involved. So it's not just as simple as saying, I want it, I'm going to go get it. Yes, you want it, but realize that it might pull you back in different areas. The ability to be able to negotiate in other areas. Just realize that, okay? Now, here's the second part. Your down payment. So your down payment, again, on a VA is 0. These are minimums. On an FHA, it's 3.5. And on a conventional, it's either 5 or 3 if you're a first-time home buyer, okay? So 3.5%, that's another $14,000 for FHA. The 3%, assuming I'm talking predominantly to first-time homebuyers here, 3% and $400,000, that's $12,000. How can you get that covered? There's 2 things that you can look into, okay? Number one, and in all honesty, in my opinion, the easiest is you can get it gifted from a friend or a relative, right? Now, there are certain people who can and cannot gift, and there are ways to gift, and there's timelines and all kinds of things. Make sure you talk to your lender and your realtor months out. Sometimes you got to do what's called seasoning of funds, which means you've got to have funds sitting in your account for a certain amount of days, right? Make sure you talk about this ahead of time. Do not wait until 30 days prior. We can come up with a lot more strategies to help you if you come to us earlier, okay? Sometimes the seasoning doesn't apply. It's all dependent, again, on the loan program and what you're trying to do and who's giving you the funds. Okay, but they can give you some or all of the funds to take care of that. Number one. Number two is a USDA loan option. Now, there are different grants out there given by the county, the state, the city, whatever, and they come and they go. And when they come, they generally last for weeks, not months, because everybody is flying after them. Every time it happens, every realtor and their mother is trying to pitch on Facebook, hey, come get this money. Hey, come get this money. And then by the time people get off the couch and say, okay, Joe, I'm ready, I got to say, well, the money's gone. I'll let you know next time, right? So be really quick. Be ready. Be prepared. That's the number one thing I see people not doing is when they decide they want to buy, it's kind of like a whim. Like, hey, today, you got me, Joe. I decided I want to do it. And we're kind of set back a little bit, right? If they say, hey, I want to do it and we're 4 to 6 months out, awesome. I can do a lot of things for you potentially. If you say, hey, I'm ready, we want to be in a house in 30 days. If all the stars align, your credit's good, your cash, if everything's good, we're good. But if you need anything where those strategies would help, it can be challenging. So I say that because I'm trying to pressure you guys to get in touch with your realtor, with your lender 4 to 6 months out. Do not wait until the last minute. Okay. But this USDA loan or the grants, those are options too. And again, you can talk with your lender. They can tell you what the different options are. They can tell you if it makes sense for you. Sometimes the fees are a little bit higher and it doesn't make sense. Sometimes the terms are worse. Sometimes you've got to live there a certain amount of years. If you don't, you got to pay the money back. There's pros and cons to all of this. But really, the solution isn't to be overwhelmed, because you're going to be, trust me. The solution is find a lender you love and trust. If you don't know one, ask the realtor you love and trust for a referral. I'm only going to refer the guy who I know is going to educate my clients, make them feel good, and is going to get the deal closed. I'm not going to give you to somebody who has a low chance of closing and doesn't offer a lot of loan options, right? So when you go to a realtor, we're motivated to give you the referral or the name of a lender who we think has a good shot at closing this. We want to give you the best. It's also, a reflection of us. So that's one good way to get a solid lender. Once you get that solid lender, now you can start asking all these questions, and they're not going to give you, like right now I'm giving you if this then this, but if this then this, but if this then that. Like I'm probably overwhelming you a little bit with some of this, and that's okay. Once you talk with a lender and they see your exact scenario, they're either going to tell you, hey, you got like 2 options here that kind of make sense for you. This one's going to be a little bit more cash heavy, but your terms are better. This one's lighter on the cash, but your terms are worse. Which one's more attractive to you? Or they're just going to say, looking at all this, this one is the clear winner. There's no reason not to do this. This is what I would do, and this is why. But they're going to make you so much more confident, and they're not going to give you all these different scenarios like I'm giving you, because they know your exact situation. So again, worst case scenario, if you are not a first-time home buyer and have to have conventional for whatever reason, you're going to be 5% in down payment. And let's just say in the higher end, you're going to be 4% in closing costs. That's 9%. On a $400,000 home, that's 36 grand. That's your worst case scenario if you're looking for minimum out of pocket. For most people, they're going to be able to get FHA, which is 3.5% down. And their closing costs are going to be around 3.5%, which is 7 total percent on 400 grand is 28 grand. If you get 28 to, what was the first number I said? 9 is 36 to $36,000. You're gold. We can do a lot of things with you. But if you're short on that, like I said, there are a lot of different options we can implement to ensure you get into that house. Guys, if you got any questions, if you want us to run your specific situation so you can see exactly what you can and cannot do and what the best route for you is going to be, it'll make my day. And I don't even care if you use me as your realtor. What I want is to get you out of renting and get you into a home where you're building up equity. Again, you got another realtor, use them. But if this is the video that gets you to make that call and start talking about the numbers so you can change your future, it's not going to make my day. It's going to make my month. It's going to make my year. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. Excuse me. If there's anything I can ever do for you, reach out. Otherwise, have a phenomenal Friday and an even better weekend. Take care.